Hello, everybody, and welcome to your Wednesday edition of NBL Now. I'm Pete Hooley, and I promised you last week that we'd have some special guests for our Wednesday edition of the podcast, and I'm very excited to welcome an NBL fan favourite today who is hopefully just taking a short break from us down here in Australia, and he's keeping a very close eye on what's going on. Alan Big Sauce Williams, welcome to NBL Now, mate. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Pete. Thanks for having me on. Always great to be able to touch base back home. I call it home in Australia because we loved it so much down there. So, always good to be connected.
Now, I know you've been keeping a very close eye on the NBL. You've been active on Twitter, so we're going to chat all the things that are happening, going on leading up to round 4. But firstly, tell us a little bit about where you're at right now.
I am currently in Goyang, South Korea. Which is about 30 minutes outside of Seoul. And, here playing in the KBL this season. And, getting started here pretty soon. We play some preseason games. So we start up in about 10 or 11 days and just super excited for this opportunity that I'm at here.
Well, I know there's going to be a lot of NBL fans watching you hoop there in South Korea, but also hoping that in NBL 26 we get to see you back on the floor. But I know you have been watching the NBL and you're an avid follower of the league. You said it's home. So round 3 is in the books. Early thoughts on the season so far?
A lot of buckets. We're seeing a lot of points scored in abundance. Obviously, it's a talent-rich league. There's no question about that. From the imports to the locals, you just have a slew of talent everywhere you look, and it's shaping up to be a very exciting season. I think there's some surprise teams that weren't really expected to be doing as well as they are now, as well as some teams that you may have thought would be doing a little bit better. And so I think that parity just creates a constant desire to want to watch every single round, every single game, because every moment matters. And so it's really exciting to tune in and watch the NBL as it continues to grow.
Well, one of those teams that hasn't got off to the best start you're very familiar with, your old team, the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, currently 0-4, heading in to play Brisbane at home, John Cain Arena, on Saturday night, who are also winless. There's obviously a lot of heat on the Phoenix. You've been watching them play, no doubt. What do you think's going on in terms of them struggling to get a win so far?
Yeah, obviously not the start I'm thinking they would expect to have had at this point, but they've played a bunch of road games, in those 4 games that they've had. Obviously some neutral site games, but we know that traveling to Perth is pretty tough to try to get a win out there, regardless of if it's against Perth or whatever it may be. But, I look for them to get back home at John Cain, playing against a Brisbane team who was also desperate for a win. But I kind of look for them to get around the crowd and get to that fire pit and play with some energy. They're going to have a good period of time in between last round and this one to really get things kind of shaped up and figure out rotations and ways to be creative to try to get Derek Walton Jr. going. And same with Nathan Sobey. Obviously, Matthew Hunt, has been absolutely special. And so I think just finding ways to continue to run the offense through him. And like I said, I'm looking forward to them possibly getting a win on this Saturday at home. And I think that the fire pit energy will ignite the Phoenix for sure.
Do you think the 9-day break has come at a good time then? Because Mike Kelly said in the press conference after their loss to Adelaide that it's going to hurt, because normally when you 0-3 and there's this outside noise and you're struggling to put it all together, you want to play as soon as possible to get that win. But the other side of that is, as you said, you can really try and figure things out rotation-wise, style of play, role clarity over the 9 days. Do you think it's a positive thing they've had such a long break, or is it more of they'd be desperate to get on the floor?
I think as a player, you want to go out there and try to get a win as quick as possible. And I'm sure the coaches are trying to get that turnover as well. But I think in reality, they need this break because there are some actual signs of just kind of clunkiness and lack of cohesion, with the new group that they have. Obviously, it's a lot of new faces, there with the Phoenix this year and guys stepping into different roles. And so I think role clarity is going to be super huge. And what better way to find role clarity than to get a period of time to where you don't have to worry about wins and losses. You can just worry about what you have going on internally and try to work things out so that you can go out and get a win.
You have been tweeting about the Phoenix. I know you'll be tuned in on Saturday night. It is a big game. 2 winless clubs trying to get their first one on the board. But you also had a tweet this week about Kendrick Davis, who responded to some talk that was out there in emphatic fashion, had an unbelievable round, led Adelaide to 2 wins. What impressed you the most about the way that he responded?
I think he just got comfortable. Obviously, you sign a player like Kendrick Davis because you know what he can do. And when he doesn't do it in the first 2 rounds, there's a sense of panic, like, oh, he's not going to be worth something, or, oh, why would they make that signing, and how could they miss like that, when in reality, it takes time for guys to adjust, especially people who have never played in the NBL before, who don't really understand the nuances of how to get to their spots and how to still create offense for their teammates and all those kind of things. And so I do think there's a sense of grace that needs to be had, especially with first-time imports, because it's not easy. It's not as easy as picking up a ball and go playing in an Australian gym and everything's going to be the exact same as it was prior to. And so, just super excited for him and that Adelaide team getting those wins and him performing the way that he did. Obviously, I'm never going to sit here and say that the media drove him playing well, because that's silly to think that obviously we're going to read the stuff, but there's no element of, oh, I need to make sure that I play well so that Derek Rucker or Olgan tell me that I'm doing well, because that's crap. So, but no, again, it is really exciting, and I'm happy for him that he was able to, again, get comfortable, and looking forward to seeing him continue to play well throughout the rest of the season.
It's a good point you bring up, Source, because as a professional athlete of any sport, especially here in the NBL, when you see the media and you understand that there's going to be noise, there's going to be heat depending on how you're playing, as you said, players see it all, right? Regardless of whether they respond online themselves. But Kendrick Davis not only responded on the floor, but he responded on socials himself too and said, we're going to revisit that. As a competitor, do you see that and go, I like this, he's going to have a little bit more edge about him and he's going to go and prove everybody wrong?
Yeah, I mean, whatever gets you going. So if that's something that's going to continue to push him and motivate him so that he has that bulletin board material, good for him. Again, I don't think it has as much to do with the way that he performed as a lot of people are going to take it and think it. And that's just the space that as media people, we can kind of be in, is to think that our words truly hold weight into the decisions that are made on a daily basis or the way the team players perform. It's just commentary. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, Kendrick Davis has to go out there, lace his shoes up, and play the game of basketball. You know what I'm saying? And so it's all on his own merit and his own work that he's going to be able to be successful. The same with all the other players. But again, yeah, if that's something that motivates him, then I think it's super cool that he can do that. And for the other guys around the NBL, if they can use whatever they read or see that helps them kind of get to that next step or that next level, and then more power to them.
You said just before about when players come in and they lace them up and they're trying to go out there and adapt to the NBL, as a new import in particular, who may have been playing in the G League, may have been on the fringe of an NBA deal, may have been in Europe, coming in and understanding that it does take time to adapt. It takes different players longer, and some people can come in like yourself and have a big impact straight away. Why do you think that it does take some imports and new players a little longer? And why should we not overreact in the first 3 rounds if a player is underperforming in the first couple of weeks?
Yeah, I just because the NBL is a different league than Europe in a way of European basketball is very X's and O's based. It's very finite. The coach has an idea of kind of everything going on. I'd like to say it's a more structured basketball game, whereas the NBL is kind of free flowing, similar to the NBA and that kind of thing. And when you get to a space where you're kind of expecting it to be one thing and it turns out to be a completely different thing, it's difficult for guys to try to adjust. And so I think that period of time, those first couple of games, you got to give your imports, right? Because there's so much pressure on the imports anyway. You got to give those guys time to be able to adjust and read the floor, because obviously as the season goes on, there's going to be true and clear signs of players if they're not able to play at this level. throughout the year. But I think early on, there is that period of time where you just need to be able to adjust your mind to how this game is played, the speed in which the NBL is played, the way that it's officiated. They're all things that are very different than, say, your G League or your European basketball at that level.
Well, you mentioned a couple of names there. We know it's been very fun to watch in the first 3 weeks. So, Big Sauce, what team and a couple of players maybe who's impressed you the most in the first 3 rounds?
Yeah. Teams, I think Illawarra, there's no question. I just think that the way that they're built, they did a tremendous job of building out that roster. And I love seeing my boy Trey Kell with the ball in his hands. I think he's an amazing decision maker. Obviously can fill it up and get buckets, but is able to run that offense. He's a two-way player. He's my MVP pick right now if it had to be today. He obviously he's a special player, and I'm so glad that he's been able to find his way through the NBL, starting in Southeast Melbourne, having a good year at Adelaide last year, and now it all starting to come together. Again, it goes back to that cohesion and that time period of adjusting. You see what happens. You see Bryce Cotton. You see what happens when you give imports in the NBL time to be themselves. It ends up being something great, and I think Trey Kell is a perfect example of that. The Cairns Taipans, wow. Can't say enough about how 40s put that young, scrappy group together. Big fan of Rob Edwards' game. Watched him at ASU when he was there. Worked out with him a couple of times throughout the summer. I see him quite a bit when I'm back home. And so just really happy for his success and how he's been able to start off so strongly this year. And then, like those two teams are up there. I think Melbourne United is better than what people were expecting them to be. I think that front court combination, with Jack White, with Marcus Lee and, Rob Lowe is really surprising a lot of teams with the versatility that they can do, especially on the defensive end. Those three I'd say are the ones that I've kind of been really impressed with. Maybe because they were just surprises in my mind, but yeah.
Well, on Friday night, Adelaide 36ers play host to the Sydney Kings, and I know you'll be tuned in. I'm going to be down there looking forward to that because you've got Kendrick Davis versus Jalen Adams, DJ versus Bullquall, Montrezl Harrell versus Xavier Cooks, and then when Cam Oliver hits the floor, you've got Kelly LePepe versus Isaac Humphries. This is a matchup fiesta.
Absolutely. Just talent all across the board. I mean, I think it's one of those games where no matter where you are in the world, you're going to be tuning in. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of NBA eyes as well as high-level Asian and European teams tuning into that game just because there's just so much talent on the floor. I think the roster that Sydney have also built, obviously with Gordon coming back, they look amazing. Obviously they're still trying to work out the kinks and figure out rotations and ways to do it. But you got a next star in Alex Tui who looks phenomenal this year. Obviously Zave is back and he's at that level. I think Jalen Adams is showing again that class that he showed the year that he won the MVP. So to do that, and then you have the Adelaide team where DJ looks like an all NBL type player, Trez with the energy. Isaac's finally got himself going again. I'm excited for that matchup, and it's going to be one for the books, I'm sure.
Well, I can't wait for it all. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Big Sauce, and I've got to ask, otherwise all the NBL fans will be on top of me for not asking. Are we going to see Big Sauce back in Australia?
Hey, man, I'll never put it past anything. I love my time there. My partner and I had an amazing 2 years in the city of Melbourne, in the country of Australia. Again, like I said, it feels like a second home for us. And so that door will always be open. There's always going to be interest on my side to possibly get back down there and play in front of those great Australian fans again and New Zealand fans again. So I'm not going to put it past it. I signed a 1-year deal here, so we'll see what happens in the summer.
Well, I'm going to keep pushing it as long as all the other NBL fans do as well, because we loved you here and we want to get you back. There we go. Sauce, mate, it's been a pleasure. We'll get you on again, no doubt, because we know you're watching the NBL hoops. Thanks for tuning in, because we'll start tuning into your games when that season kicks off as well, and it's always a pleasure, mate.
Right on, Pete. I appreciate it, man. All the best.